So it's kind of, in order to get to Petersburg, we have to leave at 6 a.m. Tuesday morning. So that's why we changed our meeting date. Okay, so do we have any non-Rotary announcements? Jeff?
The Sitka Monthly Grind is back for its 28th season starting October 8th. It will be the Beetle Grind. It will be at the Sheep Pond Nakahiti. And Linda is producing it. And so we're firing that back up again.
So
and
is
the
it,
Whale Fest. We'll do the Whale Fest Grind.
is it only Beatles type material?
Not
type
the
thing?
bugs, but like singing the songs that the Beatles did.
Really, not the bug.
That's what you were trying to embark on. Anyhow, yeah. So tickets will be at Old Harbor Books in the door. $5 still.
Great. Are they doing the dessert thing anymore, or?
Yes, ma'am. We have permission to do that. So there'll be a dessert. Thank you for asking. There'll be a dessert contest. There'll be fabulous prizes.
Great. Are you going to make a dessert?
Me?
Yeah.
No, ma'am.
No.
I haven't suggested that. Maybe I will. I don't know.
If you did, what would you make, Jeff?
Marshmallows.
Nice.
Hard to make.
I've heard that. Although I've heard they're easy to make too, but I've never tried.
They're also easy to flambe.
That's what we could do.
Okay, do we have any other non-Rotary announcements? Do we have anything from Zoom?
I'm sorry to ask this again, but on the cruise, what time does it start? I'm just putting it in my calendar. I'm sorry.
Leaves the Crescent Harbor at 9 o'clock in the morning, comes back at noon.
It embarks at 8:30.
We leave at 9 a.m., so it's good to be there around 8:30 to get on the boat.
Okay.
For anyone who's not quite sure yet, we're going to get on the boat probably starting around 8:30, and the boat's going to leave the harbor at 9 o'clock.
If you're going to be attending, please let me know. If you're bringing other people, let me know so we get those squared away now before we start going out.
Norm?
Great.
John has
Thank
guaranteed
you.
that it's going to be clear skies, calm seas. So everybody sign up.
Wow, that's nice.
Oh, now I'm not going for sure now.
Can I choose some other dates for things I want to do, and you'll guarantee the weather for me?
You have me confused with someone else.
Go ahead, Mr. Stein. Oh, you're a senior to me.
You were in my mission. No. Anyway, Shannon approached me about the Rotary Exchange Program, and apparently we're going to have a student this year, and she's recruiting helpers. She's also looking, I don't know whether she has the person cited yet as far as who he or she is living with, but I'm an advisor.
So we have a boy. He's going to be coming in January. So it's going to be a little bit different year. He'll be here from January through December. His name is Perfect, and he is from South Africa. He's originally from Zimbabwe. And so Shannon has reached out to him, and anyone who wants to reach out to him by email or if he's got a Facebook or whatever, you guys can get a hold of Shannon. She can give you the information, or you can get a hold of me, and I can give you the contact information. So I'm not sure how much he's looked into Sitka yet. I think he probably just found out, and it's still obviously a little ways away for him. He didn't have too many questions yet, but we do have, it appears we have at least a welcome family set up, which normally is somebody who will take the person for the first few weeks or so. It may turn into a more permanent home. We do like to try to have 3 different homes for the exchange students to stay in, if at all possible. So if you or anyone you know you think might be interested in hosting, you can let Shannon know, or you can let me know, because there is a vetting process. We can't just let them stay with people without going through, background checks and things like that. And it doesn't have to be a Rotarian. You don't have to be married. You can be married. You don't have to have kids. You can have kids. It's basically, if you're interested in hosting, get a hold of us, and we'll see if we can make it work. And it's just so that they get a better idea of differences here versus just staying with one family the whole year. If that's what ends up happening, that's what ends up happening. And also keep in mind that when we do have an exchange student, we encourage the other members to also participate in any way that they would like to. You know, having them over for dinner, if you're doing any kind of, you're going out on a boat, you're driving up Harbor Mountain, you're going on a hike, anything like that. They're pretty much told not to say no to, you know, adventures like that, just so they can get to know more people and more of the area and just get to see more of things. And so keep that in mind, and we'll keep reminding you since it's still a ways away. Thank you.
Tag back onto the boat thing. John, is it okay to say that we might have some younger people, like the JVs and AmeriCorps and Outer Coast people, so...
Since you're assembling them, of course it's okay to say that.
Well, I mean, but we could use some help in paying for them. That's what I'm getting at.
So-
Economic support would be a wonderful thing.
That's
So
what I-
Jeff is saying that we might have some people, some volunteers who would like to attend on the cruise, and if anyone wanted to help with paying for their tickets, let John know, and then that way he'll know how many slots are available.
Thank you.
So how much for those tickets again?
That's a very good question. That's why I sent an email, because it's a broken down schedule, which is a little interesting, but it's worked well for us for the last 3 cruises, so we're continuing. The last 2 cruises in particular, we had a number of families that went because it was economical, where it wouldn't be if it had been any of the other cruises. So we want to try and keep that tradition as best we can.
So it would be inappropriate to sponsor a 5-year-old just by itself.
No, because they have to be accompanied by an adult, so you'd be the one accompanying them.
That was a joke, yes.
Yes, I got it.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so John has emailed this out
Another
to all of
train
the
to do
members.
it.
So everyone should have that email from John. That's a copy of the flyer that does have the prices on it. If anyone has any questions, they can get a hold of John. I would assume you guys all know how to do that at this point. Okay, so we don't have any other questions or announcements. I'm going to go ahead and have our speaker come up, and this is Jason Schmidt, and she is with the Sitka Sound Science Center, and she is going to talk to us about the landslide project. So please welcome her.
I'm just going to get situated here. Putting the screen share. Okay. So thank you for having me. I'm here today to talk about the Sitka landslide research happening out of the Science Center, but I'm also going to tell you a little bit about myself. I've been the geoscience coordinator at the Sitka Sound Science Center for the last year. I moved here in July of 2021, and I've had the opportunity to engage with the community in a few different ways. It's really nice to see a few familiar faces here. I have a radio show on KCAW and live downtown, so you might have seen me around that way. But professionally, I spend a lot of time at the Science Center thinking about landslides. And I've been working with the Sitka Landslide Research Project for the last year of my time in Sitka.
Can we ask questions? You want to wait till the end?
Oh, good point. I think I have a short presentation prepared, so I'll go through my presentation, and then I'd love to take questions at the end. Let's see if I can figure out how to change the slide. Cool. So this is a picture of me in the field. I studied geology at Carleton College, and for my thesis there, I thought a lot about land movement, and so coming to Sitka has really been a dream to work on the Sitka Landslide Research Project because it's all about geomorphology and the way that the landscape here is really active and changing. I also really love science that's really integrated with the community, and so the Science Center was a perfect place for me to land after college. This is a picture of me in the field and a picture of my face, in case you don't recognize me.
What are you doing there?
So I'm actually looking at a landslide scarp. This picture was taken in Haines, actually. This summer I had the opportunity to travel to to 3 other communities in Southeast Alaska that are also looking at geohazards. And so here we are looking at a place where a hillside came down kind of near some houses during the December 2020 storm. And I'm taking notes, drawing a picture, looking at a lot of sand and cobbles, trying to describe what we're seeing there. So that was part of some field work I did this summer. Yeah. And I'll get to talk a little bit more about why I was in Haines later in my presentation. So back to the Sitka project. I'm here today talking about the Sitka Landslide project, but there's a large group of people who have been working on this project for a while now. You'll also notice that there are partner communities listed, and that's part of the fieldwork that you saw the picture of me doing and what you'll hear about later in the presentation as well. But a lot of these partners were also included in the work that was happening at the Science Center over the last 5 years. So some of the partners and collaborators I'll highlight are, of course, the Science Center. The National Science Foundation provided the funding for this work. The RAND Corporation has been really involved in a lot of the social science aspects of the work, whereas the University of Oregon has done a lot of the heavy lifting with the geoscience stuff. We've also partnered with the Sitka Tribe of Alaska to do oral history interviews, and Tammy Young from Sitka Tribe has also been really instrumental in the rollout of this project as well. So yeah, it would be remiss for me not to talk about all of the other people who have been involved in working on this project for a long time. And with just one person showing up to speak to you today, I don't want to give off the impression that this is all me. There's a lot of other people who are putting in the work and time who I've been working with on this project. So a little bit of project history. You might recognize these beautiful blue skies. The Sitka Landslide project you might be already familiar with. This work has been happening in town for the last 5 years. The project kicked off in Sitka after the 2015 landslides that were really devastating to our community. 3 people were killed in a landslide that winter. Actually, it happened in August, so that year. But that was kind of the first time that Sitka realized that landslides were something that we needed to worry about. Before that event, folks were more concerned about tsunamis or earthquakes, and that landslide was surprising and something that kind of shifted the focus of the Science Center. Specifically, Lisa Bush, our executive director, after that event really wanted to pull people together to think about the issue. And so they, after that landslide, were talking about what questions the community was really concerned about. And that is what began the Sitka Landslide Project as we know it today. So the project started after the 2015 slide and has been doing work over the last 5 years. And I'm here today because we're reaching the end of that project. We're celebrating the end of that project too, because we've developed a landslide dashboard that I'm excited to share with you today. That's kind of a culmination of a lot of the work that's been going on and a tool for the community. And I'm also going to share with you a little bit of the next steps, what it means for this project to be ending, and what it means for what's next. So I stepped into the project. I'm going to start here actually. So after the 2015 slides, one of the biggest questions that folks were interested in is where might landslides happen in Sitka? For a mountain to come down on town is a really scary thing, and we have, you know, our whole town is pinched between the mountains and the ocean. And so one of the first questions that folks tackled when they were working on this project was to map where landslides might happen in the future. And there's a couple ways you can do that. The picture on the left here is a geologic map. Annette Patton from the University of Oregon produced this map. And it is showing the material that makes up the ground in Sitka. And so you can see the green areas are where glacial till has been left behind. The greywacke is on the top of those purple areas on the mountains. And then the piece that's really important for where landslides might happen is where they've happened before. And so those red debris flow fans show where landslides have happened before based on the material that's making up the ground. Another way that you can look at how landslides, where they might happen. Oh, okay. I'm gonna try and speak a little louder. Can everyone hear me okay like this? Okay. The other thing that you can do to figure out where landslides might happen in the future is by looking at the shape and steepness of hillsides. And so the map here on the right is a map that's showing susceptibility based on a runout model. So it's looking at how steep slopes are and the shape of them, how concave or convex they are. And so these maps were produced pretty early on in this project, right after the landslides happened in 2015. And, but that's not the only question that folks were concerned about. Another question that came up was, when might they happen? It happened, the 2015 landslide was a really wet and a really windy day. And when it rains in Sitka, folks worry about landslides because we know that when it's wet, that's when landslides tend to happen. And we know also that it's the wetness and those big storms that destabilizes our slopes. And so this project has been looking a lot at the weather and the precipitation patterns across Sitka. And so when the project began, we realized that the Sitka airport was the one of the only places that we were measuring rainfall data. There's a lot of also people who have rainfall information at their homes, which is awesome. But we started the project and put a rain gauge on the top of Harbor Mountain. So now we have a weather station at elevation, which is awesome. And we also have 10 rain gauges that are measuring hourly rainfall across the entirety of Sitka. So as far up as almost to the ferry terminal and as far south as Bear Cove is the farthest south. And those rain gauges are also, they're distributed across the road system, and they're also mid-slope on some of the mountains too. So we're getting a lot better information and better resolution information about rainfall in town. So when I started on this project, it was a big part of my job to go out and make sure these were functioning. So that's kind of how I began with this project. And then as we were building models and understanding, kind of getting better answers to the questions about when landslides might happen, I was still maintaining these instruments and also building a tool to communicate what we were learning. That's what I'll get to share more today. So we started the process of building a landslide dashboard to communicate some of the science that we were working on. And we worked with a dashboard developer team called Azavia. And Azavia was really interested in helping us to build a tool that would work for the community. And so the first thing we did was we identified the user groups that we thought would use this tool. And when we were just starting to build the tool, our team was like, you know, who do we want to use it? Everyone. We want everyone to be able to use it. Any person. And they were like, okay, yeah, like you want everyone to use it, understood. But we need to think more specifically about who will be using it. So we created these user groups. Everyday Sitkans is kind of the bucket that encompasses the everyone should be able to use it mentality. But we also realized that there are other people in town who would also be using this app, or web page, excuse me. city officials like fire chief, volunteers at the fire hall, the city council, schools, the superintendent kind of fall into this category of folks who are like a sort of leader in town. Also, media and journalists are important to be able to use this tool. And community connectors and caregivers, we really wanted to make sure that people who are taking care of others and are really connected to youth and older folks in town were able to use this tool and find it useful as well. And so this is also a screenshot of one of our Zoom meetings at the very beginning of building this app. You might recognize Annette is in the center. She's the geoscience lead that I mentioned, built that map of deposits in Sitka. But on the top left is Aaron Jacobs from the National Weather Service. Liz Borman works at the Sitka Tribe. And then some of the other folks here are from Azavia. But we really pulled all these different folks together to build this with one goal of being able to share the results of our research with the community. So with that, I want to show you the tool. We launched it in May, and it's something that's been online for a little while now. If you have a phone on you, I would love for you to take it out of your pocket or your bag and follow along with me. This web page was specifically designed to work best on your cellular device. So it's not an app like you would go into the App Store to buy or download. It's something that you access on the internet. So if you use, I use Safari usually, but if you have Chrome, like anything, you would go to a web page. Log on with me, please, and I'll give you just a second to get situated there. If you're online too, you can open a new tab on your browser and go to sitkalandslide.org. The other thing about the web page is that we've also saved some pages that are similar to Sitka Landslide. So if you go to Sitka Landslides, it'll also take you to this web page. If you go to sitkalandslide.com instead of .org, it'll also take you here. So we've kind of thought about where people could get lost. But if you go to sitkalandslide.org, you'll see, it's a little distorted here, but you'll see a landing page where you can see current landslide risk. And then a little bit farther down, you'll see a 3-day forecast. I looked right before I came in here, and it was all still low. About 99% of the time, Sitka is in low landslide risk. You know, when it's not raining outside, that's pretty much an automatic. Maybe you already know that, but even sometimes when it is raining hard, we're still in a low risk level. If you scroll down on that first landing page, you'll see a little bit more about understanding risk. So this area shows descriptions of the 3 risk levels. So those risk levels are low, medium, and high. You can read more. And if you scroll down more, you'll see some resources associated with this webpage. So the resources include more information about like Landslide 101, if you're wanting to know more about kind of the anatomy of a debris flow and the geology, you can go there. But I want to show you a little bit more about the forecast before we dig into all the resources. So if you, so the ultimate goal of this page is to give people information about the research we've been doing, and a lot of that too is about relieving anxiety when we're not in a high landslide risk or we don't see elevated landslide risk. The conditions do not match the conditions where landslides have happened before, and giving people information about when we are in an area in a time zone where landslides are possible. And so that's where the low, medium, and high risk levels come into play. So low is, as I was saying, the section that we would be in 99% of the time. Landslides have not been documented during those conditions. Medium is when landslides are possible. They've sometimes happened and sometimes haven't. That's something we anticipate happening or showing up on this dashboard about 0 to 3 times per year. It hasn't happened this year yet, or since May when we launched it. And then high risk level is when landslides have always happened in Sitka. We would hit those conditions when landslides have always happened or multiple landslides have happened. So the idea with this webpage is that people can go online and see what the risk level is and know whether they should activate their emergency plans. And there's more information on the webpage too, under resources, about what it looks like to build and enact an emergency plan. This is kind of a good place if you have questions about just like the website and the landing page, or if anyone's having trouble getting on, I can help you with that. Yeah.
So I don't have my cell phone with me, but I can go home and get on my computer, right, look up Sitka landslide app. So the thing that comes to my mind is like hiking, or like the cross trail, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go into that, can I look and see where on the cross trail there's possibilities for landslides and that kind of thing?
That's a great question. So the webpage itself, the risk level is all associated with the conditions where landslides happen. So there's not any spatial resolution in the risk level itself. So when we're at a low risk, that's low risk for all of Sitka. When we're at a medium risk, that's medium risk for all of Sitka. When we're at high risk, that's high risk for all of Sitka. But the spatial component is really, really, really important here. And under the resources, there's a section called Areas at Risk. And when you click on this page, it'll explain first an introduction about debris flows can't be prevented, but landslides, disasters can be avoided. Landslide risk is a combination of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability, and when hazard is elevated, like when the dashboard enters medium or high risk level, decreasing exposure by moving out of areas where landslides are likely to happen can decrease your risk. So that goes into, it's really important to know where you are in town relative to those, for example, maps that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. So it explains in plain language where landslides are likely to happen. That is, base of slopes, minor drainage hollows, and cut and fill slopes. The trails, for example, are places where there's sometimes been modification. So that's one thing that comes to my mind. But when you scroll down a little bit more, you'll also see this susceptibility map that's on the webpage. This is actually the same map that you saw at the beginning of the presentation on the right side of the screen, but it's just using pink instead of the rainbow colors. And it's showing the low to high susceptibility of certain areas around Sitka. So you could look here and say, this map is not meant to be used for like specific points, but you can see generally the areas that are more susceptible to sliding. So you could go here and look at where you like to go out on the trails and see if those areas are in places that you should avoid when we're in elevated landslide risk.
Thank you.
Yes?
So on the areas of risk map, looks like the higher risk areas have the darker pink or purple.
Yes.
Is that based on a model, or does that include historical data?
Yeah,
on those?
so the historical, so this is all based on a model, this specific map. I can talk a little bit more about it. The susceptibility map that's embedded here was produced by TerrainWorks and contracted by the U.S. Forest Service following the 2015 event. And this map has been available online for the last few years, and we've embedded it here because it's really useful when you're thinking about where landslides are possible. There's a little bit more at the bottom about the map, and it explains exactly what those colors mean. So the color on the map is affected by the probability that a landslide could initiate at an above location, in addition to the likelihood that that landslide would travel to any given location. So combined with the probability that a landslide could initiate and the probability that a landslide initiated could reach a certain position, that's what's being shown on that map. And so we talk about that as susceptibility. So there is more historical data available about landslide occurrence. the best place to find that on this website is under Report a Landslide. And we are encouraging folks, if anyone sees new land movement, a lot of people see things like this when they're on their boats or after a heavy rainfall. The Science Center, myself actually, I've been conducting community assessments trying to see if there's been anything that's going on, but people also post to Facebook and things like that. But we're trying to collect all of the landslide reportings in one place here. You can also see where existing landslide inventory marks where landslides have happened. So the U.S. Forest Service keeps a landslide inventory of the Tongass National Forest, which our town backs up to. So that's a big important piece of data for us. And so you can explore the landslide inventory at this link here. And I got to this page by going to Report a Landslide.
Slides are
Oh no! Shoot. Okay, let me go back. I apologize. Okay, so I was just showing you.
now it's,
There we go. Okay, it's working. So I was showing you. I got to that landslide inventory by going down to resources, and areas at risk is where that susceptibility map lives. And on that page, there's that plain language about places where landslides are possible. There's the map here where you can click and scroll to look at those trails or whatever else you're interested in. And then right below the map, there's some more information about describing specifically what those colors mean, what probabilities are factored in, and specifically what the legend means. And then if you go down to more resources and you click on Report a Landslide, this is the page where I was trying to show the landslide inventory that's kept by the U.S. Forest Service is right here too. So that's something that our team has been using to develop the thresholds that appear on the front page.
Looks like it includes the 2015 landslide too.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to draw your attention to while I have my screen share figured out, if you click on any of the current or forecasted risk levels, that's if you click here right at the top, I'll show you that one because it's the easiest, but you can also click on any period of time in the next 3 days. So if you click on any of these arrows too, it'll bring you to a similar page where we see a little bit more of detail about the landslide risk. So some people want to be able to log on and just see at a glance what's the landslide risk level. And there are some people also in Sitka who are more data inclined or more interested in what numbers are feeding the model. And so we wanted to make sure that's something that's also available on this website. So when we're looking at the current risk level, you'll see we're in a low risk level, and you're seeing that the last 3 hours of rainfall totals 0.12 inches. And it's that number that's feeding the model. And this graph here, I'll make it a little smaller so we can see it all in one place. So this graph is showing where the current conditions and the current risk level plot relative to the conditions where landslides have been initiated in the past. So those pink dots represent storms or conditions where landslides have initiated. And right now we're kind of down here in this corner, not in the area where landslides have been initiating in the past. So this gives you a little bit more information about the data in context. And then if you're interested to keep reading more, there's a lot more about the model and how it works just below here too. Yeah. I'm also cognizant of time. It's 12:55 right now, and I have some more slides, but I would much rather take questions from you so that we can finish up by 1 if anyone needs to leave. Yes?
So once there's been a landslide, does that forecast an additional landslide in that same area, or is it more stable?
That's a good question. So the question is, if a landslide has happened in a place, whether a landslide will happen there again. Is that the question?
Yes.
So it's kind of a complicated question, because once you've moved a lot of material, there's a lot less material to then move. So you might not see the same scale or type of landslide, but also when you move material, those areas can also be, less stable, because they're not like held together by, for example, the roots in trees, or the cohesive nature of some of the underlying geology. So it takes time for those areas to accumulate enough material to then kind of set off the same type of landslide. So if we see a debris flow in an area, it depends on how quickly that area is receiving more material to then let go. But on the grand scheme, when you think about landslides on broader timescales, like the amount of time since glaciers have left, which in Sitka is actually not that much time. On those timescales, landslides do happen in the same places again and again. So, does that help explain a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
So I think the follow-on question that he was trying to ask there is, would you build a house at the bottom of the 2015 slide slope? Is its risk higher or lower than it used to be?
In that specific area, I don't know if I can say whether the risk is higher or lower because that landslide has happened. But I know that the geology here and the type of conditions we see make for unstable slopes that can initiate debris flows, which is why we want to give people information about when those conditions are ripe. And we're encouraging people to leave areas that are marked as susceptible on the map. So I wouldn't build a house in a place where landslide susceptibility is high. But we haven't always had information about where landslide susceptibility is high in town. And so I acknowledge and recognize that there are structures in those places, and I would encourage people who are in those places to leave their homes temporarily when landslide risk is medium or high. But the other point about this tool is that different people have different risk tolerances. And at the very beginning of this project, the research team thought that they would have a warning system for Sitka that looked like the tsunami warning system, a type of alarm where it goes off and everybody is told to leave. And as the project moved on and we heard from the community about their needs and wants and what was going to work in Sitka, we moved away from that type of system and towards something that gave people information about what we were learning, so that folks can make their own decisions. So that's a little bit of the context, but I mean, I wake up every day and I think about landslides because that's my job. And so, yeah, I think I live downtown, and I know people who live in areas that who should probably leave during elevated landslide risk, and I offer my home as a place they can go during those periods, and I think that's also an important part about our town, is that while earlier in the kind of stages of this project, a lot of people thought that all of Sitka was in a landslide zone, that everybody was in danger. And we found that's not the case. About 90% of homes are not in areas that are susceptible to landslides. It's a small portion of town that is in those areas. So it's really important for us to take advantage of all the space that we have that's not in susceptible areas when we're thinking about, where I might build my home. you know, one day, hopefully, maybe. Yeah.
Would it make sense for the local radio stations to keep monitoring this and then as part of the web forecast say, the landslide risk today is low? Or do you think that would create more frustration and possibly panic?
I think that the local radio station should share this information with folks, and we've recorded PSAs through KCEW. But I think, yeah, maybe with a morning news update, it could make a lot of sense to update people about what the current risk is and what the forecasted risk is. So yeah, I think, yeah, go ahead.
The map that you have,
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a hard time figuring out where my home is because I can't get the map big enough.
Yeah.
You have a more detailed version of that map?
Let's see. So the map is specifically designed so that you're not supposed to be able to zoom all the way in on like a property.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to talk more with you about
Yeah.
yeah, how to. I know it can be kind of tricky because there's not a lot of landmarks marked on the map
Yeah,
either.
no, there aren't.
Yeah, so it can be kind of hard to navigate a little bit, but it's specifically designed so you shouldn't be able to zoom all the way in, because that's not like the purpose of that map. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk more. Yeah.
So on the Forest Service map, do you know what the time frame is that those landslides were recorded? Is that 50 years or 100 years or 2 years?
The inventory.
Yes.
So a lot of the landslide inventory landslides were mapped using older satellite pictures compared with newer satellite pictures, and some of them were also manually mapped and inputted, and so they come from a pretty, I think it's 50 years, but it should say.
I was just trying to find that. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, that's a good question.
There are a lot of blue quadrangles.
Yep. That's a really good thing. I can figure it out and add it to the description of that inventory here. Yeah. But I know that it's longer than 2 years, for example. I think it's on the scale of like decades.
We have a question from Carrie.
Hi, Carrie. Can you hear us?
Yes, I was wondering, putting two of my fears together, if we were like at moderate risk and there were an earthquake, what might happen?
Sure. So that's a great question. We do live, on the edge, at the edge of the Pacific Plate and the Oceanic Plate, with the Queen Charlotte Fault being a fault that could trigger an earthquake, and an earthquake would generate ground shaking that could destabilize slopes. The type of landslides that we're monitoring for and that the dashboard is designed for are specifically generated by extreme precipitation. So it's really the rainfall that's creating the conditions for debris flows. But if we had if we were already in the conditions where landslides could happen, and then there was an additional factor like a landslide, like an earthquake, it's possible that could also destabilize slopes. So does that answer your question? Okay, yeah. And I think one thing that could be kind of helpful too is when you look at Landslides 101 here, this talks a little bit more about debris flows specifically. These are the types of landslides that are rainfall initiated, and the types of landslides that we saw in 2015 that can be really devastating. And a little bit more about the underlying geology and what that means for landslides too.
So where do you go next?
Oh, that's great. I'm a little bit over time. Can I talk a little bit more?
Sure, as long as everybody knows it's after 1.
Okay. It's after 1. Let's see, I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can show you again my slides. So as I mentioned, I've been working on this project in my capacity as the geoscience coordinator at the Sitka Science Center. And what's next? So the grant that funded my position and the entire Sitka landslide project is coming to a close. But landslides aren't the only place Sitka isn't the only place where landslides happen in Southeast. And as we've been doing this project in Sitka, there's been a lot of interest from other communities in Southeast who want similar tools, like sitkalandslide.org. And we went back to the National Science Foundation with a new proposal to continue work looking at some of the questions that have come up in the Sitka project, specifically about atmospheric rivers and climate affecting the occurrence of things like landslides in Southeast. And we've also added some new members to our research team. So we have an atmospheric scientist and a hydrologist who are joining us for this new work. And the best thing for me is that I'll be joining this new team as well in a new capacity as part of the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Natural and Native Resources Department. So I'll be joining them I'll be staying in Sitka, and I'll be working with these other communities, and I'll continue to work with Sitka on their landslide tool. But the goal is to ultimately look at questions similar to like we did in Sitka, looking at other geohazards across Southeast. So when we have these big storms that are initiating landslides in Sitka, or other types of geohazards like flooding or other types of landslides in other places too, we're hoping to build a network across Southeast doing projects like this in partnership with other communities. So Sitka the goal is in the next 5 years, be part of a network of communities with tools that are increasing the environmental monitoring and risk tools. So that's where we're going. Yeah, and some of the partner communities are Yakutat, Klukwan, Skagway, Hoona, Craig, Kasan, and Sitka. And so the picture that I showed you earlier from Haynes was part of some initial field work for this next project. So,
Well, thank you. Thank you.
yeah. And if you have any questions or follow-up, I'll be sticking around a little bit, so I'm happy to chat. And then if you want to send me an email, or if you have like a question or a thought that comes up maybe after you've left today, please do send me an email. My email is jschmidt@sitkascience.org. You can also call the Science Center. My extension is 403 if you want to reach me there.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention too. And questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. The next week, September 13th, we'll be meeting here at UAS. If it's not in this room, it'll be in the room upstairs. I'll update you. And our speaker is our speaker's going to be on Zoom, and it's an update on the Tanzanian students that the club helped with their schooling. I believe it was last year. So, and if that's it,
Ding.
see you all next week. And I believe Lauren will be back next week leading the charge here.